Hello there, bem-amis desu and welcome to my review of Final Fantasy X. So I very recently finished Final Fantasy X. It was a game that one of the Final Fantasies that I really wanted to play. The first Final Fantasy, the first Final Fantasy that I played was actually a Dissidia, and in that Dissidia I fell in love with Yuna's character, so I wanted to learn more about her game, the game where she was the protagonist. And the game I played after was Final Fantasy VII Remake. Then I played Final Fantasy VII, the original game, which I haven't finished because I'm still missing the last dungeon. And now I finished Final Fantasy X, and I'm now progressing in Final Fantasy X-2. I was really curious about the story. I didn't have any idea what the story was about. Thanks to Dissidia, I learned that Tidus has this kind of rivalry with his dad, Jacked. In Final Fantasy X, we'll learn more about that. And I find the game just amazing. The themes that the story touches are various. There are really interesting themes and lots of emotional moments. The characters, at least the main characters, are well developed. The side characters are a little bit forgotten sometimes, for what I think, but I will later on talk about that. And the soundtrack. The soundtrack is one of the things that I think really enhances the experience. About the story, so Tidus is the real protagonist of this game, alongside Yuna, but he's the character which story will be explored, and since he's basically Yuna's right hand, you will also see lots of her story, but he will say all over the game that this is my story. It's a really, at this point, it's really a meme sentence used in this game. So Tidus is in Zanarkand. He's a blitzball star, and one day Oren just shows up, tells him that he needs to go to Spira to defeat Sin, and Sin just teletransports him to Spira, I guess. At the beginning of the game, they say that it was a years gap, so supposedly Tidus traveled 1000 years into the future to a time where Spira is experiencing this menace, which is Sin, that destroys everything, and a summoner comes along, defeats him, there's a calm where everyone is happy and there's no threats, and then Sin is reincarnated, reappears, and it starts the cycle all over again. So he's trying to help Yuna defeat Sin alongside her guardians. Compared to other summoners, she has a really big team of guardians because as you meet other summoners through the game, they usually have 2, maximum 3 guardians to protect them, and Yuna has 6 because she has Oren, Lulu, Kimari, Tidus, Waka, and Riku. So she has lots of guardians. The story then progresses. I think there are lots of twists to add to the dramatical and emotional moments, like, of course, this review will have spoilers for what I'm going to say next. You discover that the summoners sacrifice themselves, so Yuna is basically on a pilgrimage to obtain the summons that will defeat Sin, because the objective is to obtain the final Aeon. The summons here are called Aeons. So she wants to obtain the final Aeon, which will then defeat Sin. And she's doing the pilgrimage, but to defeat sin, she will also have to sacrifice herself. We don't discover how this exactly occurs, but supposedly she has to sacrifice herself. That's the final destination of every high summoner. And then you have lots of twists because you end up discovering that supposedly Tidus didn't travel 1000 years into the future, but rather he's a part of a dream. So the faith are the souls of dead people who are strong or something like that. For example, the Aeons are also resulting of the souls of the dead people, strong souls that are able to fight. And the faith, there's a place where the faith are dreaming for eternity, and supposedly Tidus comes from that dream world. I don't know how that works because he's as real as anybody else, but that adds to the dramatical effect and then to the really sad emotional moment at the end. And basically this game is constructed on little plot twists that only happen because the characters just choose to hide secrets from each other. Oren doesn't tell that the final Aeon is one of the guardians transformed in an Aeon, sacrificed to become the final Aeon. And this is not a twist, but at the beginning you discover that Jack is sin because he was Braska's final Aeon. So it's lots of these things that are dramatic plot twists, and they work, but I don't feel they work as plot twists. They work in the story and to add this depth and weight, but they don't really work as plot twists, and there's no reason for them to be holding these secrets from one another. About the characters, I really enjoy all the characters that you see throughout the game. I think most of them are not explored enough. So I will start probably with Kimari. Kimari is one of the first that we see because he's basically taking care of Yuna. Kimari, at the beginning, I thought he was really useful with his abilities, but as the game progresses, I found less and less opportunities to use him in battle. So I think he gradually lost his relevance because at the end I felt like I had a team of 6 elements instead of 7 because I didn't use Kimari at all. I quickly finished his sphere grid, and Kimari doesn't have much that characterizes him as, because his sphere grid is really small and really broad because he doesn't have many specific abilities, and he easily changes to the sphere grids of other characters, so you basically choose very early on if you want him to have more abilities like Oren, like Tidus, and he loses his sense of self, what characterizes him. So Kimari is maybe, although he has a somewhat interesting story in Mount Gagazet, I don't know, there's not lots I like about Kimari. About Waka. Waka is an interesting character because I didn't really like him at the beginning, but as the story progresses, he becomes a much more interesting character and much more useful in combat. So, for example, if Oren is the strongest character I had in my team, Waka is the second strongest. And you have all this story, the story that he has about his younger brother Chapu, and the story he has with Lulu, because you will have hints throughout the game that they have a somewhat complicated relationship. And he's a goofy character, he's a blitzball player, which I didn't like because I don't like the blitzball mechanic. I think it's it's a horrible game, and I really just played the moments that are mandatory because I wouldn't play Blitzball just for fun because the mechanics are awful, and if I wanted to play some kind of soccer game, there's lots of games out there just focused on that, and I don't like them, so I don't like the Blitzball mechanic. And that's one of the reasons I don't even care about the celestial weapons and the crest and whatnot for Waka, because they are all connected to Blitzball and I couldn't care less. But Waka is a really interesting character. Then you have Lulu. So Lulu, from a visual standpoint, I think she has the visual to be really best girl. She also has an awesome personality, but for me, Yuna will always take that spot in this game. But Lulu is an amazing character. She has an amazing design. The clothes that she wears are really interesting. And I I feel that I really wanted to know more about Lulu's past because she has already been a guardian before guarding Yuna, and she really acts as somewhat of a mother figure towards Yuna because she's always she's strict, but you know that she also holds Yuna very dear to her. And I would like to see more about Lulu because I think she's really underdeveloped. Then you have Oren. Oren must be one of the characters with the most complicated story because he was one of Lord Braska's, Yuna's father, guardians, and he accompanied Braska and Jacked, and you have the plot twist about his situation, and he's now guarding Yuna. He's really strong, he's trying to he's really being the father figure for Tidus that Jacked was never able to be. So he really took on Jact's words and took really good care of Tidus because he's always trying to guide him through this journey. And he's also, sometimes I feel like Oren is a shipper of Tidus and Yuna because he's constantly guiding Tidus to pay attention to Yuna and to go support her and things like that. So it's really interesting, and he's an awesome character. He's super fun to use in combat because he's really powerful, and the power breaks and other skills, that special skills that he has, are really useful. Riku. So Riku is, I think she's the third female character, and I didn't feel any need for her to be in the game. She is Yuna's cousin, and she is the connection to the Albed, which are seen like the low of society because they are connected to the Machina, and supposedly the Machina are what brought sin and those things. So she's there to be a bridge, to be an element of Waka really hates the Albed, so through Riku he learns to see Albed as people and not as the religion of Yevon sees those people. But Riku is a character that also grew in me, especially in terms of combat, because I thought that Riku didn't have any skills or any usefulness in combat because she's really weak in terms of a simple attack. But if you use Steel, I actually got a trophy because I stole more than 200 times with her. And if you know how to use and how to mix the items that she has, she can really be the most useful and most powerful character that you have. But for that you really have to explore or follow a guide because you can't guess what you can do, because you don't have nothing. You have nothing to guide you through all the mixes that she can do, and she can be really useful. But if you are like me, that doesn't know what she can really do, she becomes a really useless character for you. And she was basically useless until the very end, where I used her trio of 9,999. It's too much. And that mix of ingredients is really useful. I was able to defeat the final boss thanks to that, because I would be stuck on that forever if not for that. And it was really tough, and she was a really big help. About Tidus and Yuna, so they are the main characters. Yuna has this really energetic and happy personality, but throughout the game you will see that she has this conflict, this sadness, because she accepts her fate, but she also wishes she could do things for herself, because she's doing all this for Spira and for the people of Spira. And you have Tidus, which is seen as a really goofy character, but you will see throughout the game that he has some deep thoughts, and he cares, and he is really attentive to the feelings of others around him. So they are characters that have really depth when you have access to their feelings and their most insecure moments. They are really amazing characters, and all the designs, I think the designs are really good. So, about the mechanics, I think the sphere grid was one of the things that I really was afraid of, because it's not, so there's no leveling up. The grind gives you ability points, so you can have points to use on the sphere grids, and it's really important, because at some point I thought that it was kind of irrelevant, because I felt like the grind wasn't doing much for me. But it's really important to just keep doing grind, keep using the ability points on the sphere grids, because that's what gives you the HP, that's what gives you the stats that you need, the abilities, because for example, for Yuna, I didn't have her last spell, which was Holly, until literally the final boss, in which was the point I was doing grind on purpose so I could defeat Sin. So it's really important to do grind and to really take the ability points and use them on the sphere grids. And I feel like it's really necessary to see a guide to know where the level 4 spheres are, because the most powerful spells of all characters are blocked by level 4 spheres, and that is a pain, because you have to see a guide to know where to find them, where to steal or to bribe, and it's really difficult and it's not intuitive at all. Most of the time the game is really linear, so you have a determined path that you must follow, and then just before you go to defeat Sin, you have access to Sid's airship, so you can visit previous locations, do grind, find more items, or defeat other bosses, so before you defeat Sin, because you will have access to the airship. I really tried to explore, I tried to find all the Albed primers, but some of them are missable because they are given to you at a certain point of the story and you can't find it later. But I tried to gather as much as I could. I didn't get all the Albed primers. I tried to find also the Jacked spheres. At some point they gave me Banishing Blade Overdrive for Oren, which was awesome, because that overdrive is really something. And I also tried to get the summons that I didn't have. So you have the summons that that are mandatory throughout the game. And at the end of the game, before defeating Sin, I tried to get Yojimbo, Anima, and the Mega Sisters. Yojimbo was the one I obtained. I didn't obtain any of the others. I also was able to use him to use Zanmato in on Dark Valfor, because after I got Yojimbo, I tried to revisit the temples so I could do the destruction spheres, because that's the only way. Doing all the destruction spheres at every temple is the only way to get anima at the Baj temple, and the only temple I wasn't able to do was Makalania, because you have Dark Shiva guarding Makalania, the Makalania temple, and she's super fast, so the only way for me to defeat her was to have armor or equipment with auto haste and auto life or auto phoenix down or whatever, and I didn't have any of that, and I didn't want to waste more time. And at the end I didn't need Anima nor the Mega Sisters to defeat the final boss. I really think that the most difficult boss at the end of the game was probably Yunalesca. I feel like Yunalesca was the true final boss, because then you have Seymour one last time. Seymour is a character that I despise the most, be it for the story with Yuna and everything, or just because he's a pain to fight. But you fight Seymour one more time when you are inside Sin, and then you have the fights of Jacked and of you, Yevon, or his spirit, or whatever that thing was. And I feel like they are more of a formal fight, because Seymour is the villain most of the time. He's the one you are constantly finding and having to fight, and he's the one that you feel like is really stopping you from doing what you want. And Sin is the thing that is threatening Spira, so you have to fight him at the end. But I thought that fight was most a formality than a real fight. And for me, the most difficult boss was really Yunalesca. Yunalesca has 3 different phases and she has lots of HP, and be it with her death spell or the zombie status, it was really difficult to beat. That was the boss that I was stuck with most of the time. And once again, before I end this video, the story is really amazing. The things about it makes you question about the things about religion, blind faith, because Waka is one of those characters that believes blindly in the teachings of Yevon, and lots of other stuff about relationships and how they are built and how the characters connect with each other, and of course the scenes that I really loved of Tidus and Yuna together in the, I think it was at Makalania, it was at a lake, I'm not sure, but that moment was really interesting. And of course the end, where I was crying a lot because Tidus is disappearing and Yuna doesn't want to leave him, and she's just, it's really an emotional moment, and it was really something. And of course the amazing soundtrack all the time, each track. I think this was one of those games that each one of the tracks, be it in a boss, be it in a certain city or a certain scenario, each soundtrack stuck with me. And I think the only other game where that happened was Nier Automata, which also has an amazing soundtrack, and this soundtrack is really something you cannot miss. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Tell me your favorite moments, your favorite characters, what are the things that annoyed you the most, and what would you like to see more of, because there are characters that really need development. Also, it's really fun to see there are really good moments of voice acting and there are really bad moments. We all know Tita's meme laugh. and that moment really has a context, but the acting is really it's something else. And of course, there's lots of moments where the voice acting isn't great, but there are also lots of moments where it's really good, so it's really ups and downs. And of course, graphically, the game today is not really appealing, it could be better. The CGI cutscenes are really beautiful to watch, but then there's a huge gap between the CGI scenes and the in-game appearances of all characters and the scenarios around you. So it's really a big gap between the two, but it doesn't cut on your experience, so it's still interesting to watch. So tell me in the comments what are your favorite moments. Leave your tips and tricks about this game, about bosses that you find difficult to defeat, tricks that you learn throughout the game, guides that you think are good to follow for anyone that is trying to play this game for the first time. And see you!